Greetings to all, and welcome to another Q&A session with Jim McCarty and the Seattle Law of One group. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found in the list of study groups on the L&L research page shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we do meet on Zoom twice a week, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time and Saturdays 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our Facebook group or our Zoom sessions. Anyone who is interested and available is welcome to. Just contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list. We send out updates once a week to let you know what we'll be talking about that week, along with the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we keep recordings of previous podcast episodes, as well as previous recordings of Q&A sessions with Jim McCarty, as well as Austin Bridges, Gary Bean, and Tricia Bean of the L&L Research Channeling team. Just hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to receive notifications when we upload new videos, and contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com if you would like to join any of our Q&A sessions. Otherwise, we are blessed to be joined once again by our friend Mr. Jim McCarty for some informal conversation and questions and answers about the Law of One and how to live it in our daily lives. How is your daily life today, Jim?
Going pretty well. Just got to keep my eye on Bosco. He's been a beautiful soul for a number of years here, and just mostly concerned about him. My day before that, it's started off well. I've gotten some work done on my Camelot Journal entry. It's always a challenge to distill Carla's many layers of channeling of Quo, and then find a quote that substantiates what I come up with. So I got some of that work done, and moved to my neighbor's house and got a bird feeder put up higher so the deer can't get it down and eat all of it, so that the birds and the squirrels don't have anything to eat. So I've gotten a lot of good work done this morning so far.
Nice. Yeah, I always enjoy reading the Camelot Journal, and I would encourage any of our viewers who do not do that. It's a wonderful daily practice. Jim just takes a passage from Quo channelings, going basically in order in the channeling archives, and I believe you're just at the beginning of 2003 now. So
Right.
really just kind of goes through the session and shares his own thoughts and reflections, often linking it to similar passages from the Raw Contact or from other Quo channeling sessions. So it's a beautiful way. It's a beautiful daily practice, I would think, for folks who want to learn more about the Law of One. If you're interested, just Google up Camelot Journal, and I'm pretty sure you'll find the link there. Otherwise, let's see, Jim, I did have a couple questions that I wanted to ask you about, and I do see some questions in the chat window. So let me start with a question about fourth density on Earth. Would it be fair to say that as far as we know, the Earth now is vibrating fully in fourth density? I believe I've seen at least a couple times where Quo has said that in recent years, that the Earth is fully vibrating in fourth density at this time, and it's just humanity that's kind of lagging behind, hanging on to third density thought patterns or vibrations.
Right.
Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, both Ra and Quo said that the Earth itself, our Mother Earth, has made it into fourth density pretty much on time as the end of the 75,000-year master cycle ends. But there are so many other people on our planet that have not gotten that far yet. They're still in the third density of seeming separation and haven't opened their hearts in unconditional love yet. But it seems to be that there's more people around the world, no matter what situation is going on in the world, that are finding that love in their hearts to open unconditionally to everyone, seeing them all as a creator, no matter what they're doing.
And it's a really beautiful, encouraging thing to see. Not going to see it in the news so much. They seem to dwell on negative stories, but yeah, otherwise for sure. I did have a follow-up question to that, which was my actual question, which is, would you say that the Earth is vibrating fully in fourth density positive, or is it just vibrating in fourth density neutral, and it's really up to individual entities to decide whether they're polarizing more towards fourth density positive or negative?
Well, that's a good question, Jonathan. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. And I don't
Thank you.
think
I just thought of it.
I don't think that there's anywhere that it's been mentioned in any of the contacts with Ra or Quo or any other confederation that there is any kind of polarity to Mother Earth. I would guess not, because the sun and our logoi, the various creators of the galaxies, do not partake in polarity. They're there, but maybe because Mother Earth is moving through from third to fourth, that there would be a polarized nature. And if there is, and this is just a guess, I could be wrong, I would guess that she's possibly positively polarized, because I don't know how planets would be negative and fight each other. You know, it's their populations that would do that.
Right. Yeah, there's one session I can remember, and I read it more than a little while ago, so I might be a little bit hazy on the details. But I seem to remember saying, Quo saying something to the effect that Earth is sort of inherently fourth density positive, and you can see it just from kind of looking around and looking at the loving, giving nature that this planet has to nurture and sustain all life on it, not really of a negative nature. But I know that Quo also said in some other session that they said there's not really that many entities on Earth that are really consciously trying to polarize towards service to self, and that most of the, let's just say, political activity that we see that seems to be of a negative nature, they're not necessarily consciously trying to polarize towards service to self. They're just like so many other entities that are really not aware of what's going on, and so they just kind of swing back and forth. And in many ways are kind of being used by fifth density negative entities as dupes, because those entities apparently just feed on vibrations of fear, which would explain so much of what we see happening around. Do you have any thoughts, reflections on that? Does that seem to jive with anything that you have read or remember from channeling sessions?
I think that's basically correct. Yeah.
That's good. I have one other follow-up question on that, and that is about social memory complexes. So if or when Earth does become or form a fourth density positive social memory complex, would that mean it's composed of all living things, or is a social memory complex, would it just be humanity's consciousness? That's
It would be, yeah, it would be the third density entities that have been able to open their hearts and unconditional love more than 51% of the time. So that Ross said that after the harvest is made and there is a social memory complex in the fourth density, the third density would be inactivated for a period of time. There would still be first and second, the third inactive, because the fourth density entities that are a member of the social memory complex have to learn how to shield themselves from being seen by others, because if third density entities could see fourth density entities, that would give them an unfair advantage of knowing, oh, there's more to life than just this thing right here. So maybe I don't have to do too much work. You know, I'll just wait till I get there.
right, right. Yeah, I think the thing that I was curious most about would be whether that social memory complex is really made up of just human consciousness, or if it is representing a planetary consciousness. Would it represent the consciousness of all living entities on the Earth, including, first, second, plants, animals, and so on? What I think I hear you saying is that it would, as far as you can tell, it would just be human consciousness.
I think it would just be human consciousness that would feel more of an affinity and a unity with other life forms. But I've also heard a good deal about some creatures like whales and porpoises that might be more advanced than we are. It might be part of that social memory complex. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows, indeed. I believe we have other things to be thinking about that are probably more important at this nexus in space-time and time-space. And specifically, we've got some questions in the chat window. So see a good number of folks in the chat window. And again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us for the Zoom call. And let's see, I see questions from Tom, Dan Ferrero, Murray Grimson, and Dan Dunn. So that's the order we'll go for starters. And again, anyone who's on the Zoom call, if you have a question you would like to ask, please go ahead, type it into the chat window, and we'll just go in the order that I see them there. So starting with Tom. Tom, would you like to unmute your mic and ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jonathan, and hi, Jim. I just wanted to share something real quick. I'd asked you last time I was on one of these calls about my cat who was capturing and killing these little creatures in the backyard, and you had given me some of your experience around that. And I think the cat had really taken out maybe 13 or 14 little mice or bunnies or lizards. But about 4 weeks ago, we heard her meowing. I'll tell you the story because I know your heart's heavy with your own cat. But about 4 weeks ago, we heard the cat meowing out in the front. We thought, oh, she's caught another something and she's killed it. But when we went to the door, she had tried to capture this little lizard, but the lizard had outsmarted her and had bit her cheek, and the poor thing was attached to her cheek, and so she really needed help. But we kind of got a laugh out of that. We thought that was nature sort of balancing itself in that scenario. So I wanted to share that with you just as a happy story. But my question is specific to social memory complexes as well, which is the way I studied the raw material about 2 years ago was I listened through the YouTube recordings. So I just it took me about a year and a couple months just to listen to all of them. But at some point while I was listening, I started to either imagine or pick up that that there were that Carla's dialect, her dialect was slightly changing at times. It was almost as if there was like a slight, maybe little accent to her voice, and I didn't know if I was imagining that or not. And I remember Dawn had asked something to Raw about like, hey, when we're engaging with you, is it always the same person, or is it a different person? And I just wanted to know if you, who had recorded all that, and I appreciate that, if you had any experience in hearing anything like that, or maybe if I just imagined it.
No, I haven't had any feelings that there was a different dialect or tone to her voice. I've been listening to the recordings that we have on our website, a couple of them a week, and I haven't seen any there either. But I know that at some point, her physical body had more vital energy than at other times, and that it could be that if she didn't have enough vital energy at a particular session, that there might have been a variation in her voice, but I was never really aware of it myself.
Okay. And so when you talked about that, did you feel like each time that you engaged with Ra or channeled Ra, did you ever just sort of question whether it was like one entity that was speaking on behalf of the social memory complex, and that entity would, as if like, right, imagine all of us become a social memory complex. Well, how would we then channel to someone else? Would we take turns? I just was curious if you ever thought about that.
Well, at one point, they did answer that type of a question. They said that Don asked that, and they said, well, you are speaking to the same portion of the raw contact each time. But when you speak to that same portion, it is the same as speaking to everyone, all 6.5 million, because they are social memory collectives. They're all one.
That's hard to get my head around, but okay, that's helpful. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your question.
Sure.
That's a really interesting question, Tom. Never thought of that. Appreciate your asking. I know that Quo is in the habit of saying "an unique" instead of "a unique," as we say in the States, and I've been told that that's a common way to speak in the UK. So maybe Quo is British or something. I don't know. That would be really funny to hear him speak in a British accent, but we shall see. Dan Ferreira, you had a question you wanted to ask?
Yes, thank you. Hi, Jim. All right, so quick monologue about myself. It's not gonna be too long, but I just want to explain where I am today and then see your feedback. But I'm still new in the spiritual journey. It has been over a year. I grew up atheist. I've always been pessimistic, but I believe I am acting on faith. Following this journey with the law of one, and I'm doing my best to, always raise my vibration. But I'm still frustrated in terms of like actually seeing evidence, feeling evidence. And I have seen things happen out of the blue, or I don't know. It's just not enough for me, and that's how I feel, right? And I know I have to be patient and wait for my time. I guess when the time is right. Or I think
Dan, are you
Paul even.
referring to external evidence or internal evidence?
I guess internal, something that would make me be like, oh, that is not my thought. That's someone else, or that's my higher being. It's like I see the only evidence I see is from people. Like, I see all these people having these awakenings, and that's how I know it's true because, I don't believe, we're all crazy, right? I don't believe in that. And I do feel like I get excited following this path because I've seen like some benefits, right? But I feel like I still want to see what other people see and like, talk to someone, see a UFO or, it's like, I guess I don't know why I yearn for that so much. And then I just want your feedback on that. Maybe I need to calm down, or maybe you have tips for like how I can increase my vibration. Maybe I've been so negative in my life that I have so much to make up for it. I don't know, but I'll pause right here. Well, I'll stop and I'll just take your feedback, Jim. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I just get the feeling from what you said, you're following your spiritual path very assiduously and very constantly. And I think that's what you have to just keep on doing and not look for any physical or metaphysical feedback. You have to have the faith that all is well and all will be well, and the will to continue moving along the path, even when you don't get what you think you ought to get. Carla always said, don't try to take your spiritual temperature. It's something that you can't be aware of consciously most of the time. At some point, maybe you will have an awakening. Maybe you'll see things from a larger point of view, but that will happen in its own time. So just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great.
Thank you. Dan, if it makes you feel any better, I haven't seen any of that stuff either that so many other people seem to have. But I definitely feel like I'm a better person than I was before learning about this. I definitely feel like I'm more loving and compassionate, and that's definitely good enough for me. Thanks again for the question. Murray, you had a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, hi, Jim. An absolute pleasure to speak to you, and sincere thanks for all the work that you do and the guidance that you provide. My question's about the archetypical mind. In past sessions, you've talked about it being an advanced practice, and Ra talks about the pull of the magnet. It certainly is something that pulls me. And I recall you mentioning that in your own practice, you haven't found a way to clothe yourself personally in an archetype, which was an even more advanced practice that Ra was referring to. So I'd like to ask a question, really more of a confirmation to test whether I might be on the right track in understanding a way in which this could be done. In session 91, Don asks Ra directly for an example of how to become an archetype, and Ra suggested the magician, the matrix of the mind, explaining that by doing so, the seeker opens themselves to the magic of the logos and frees the mind from mental clutter. It sounds to me remarkably similar to meditation, specifically a form of active embodiment where one consciously assumes the role of the magician as a state of being. So my question, do you see this as an example of how one clothes oneself in an archetype?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know what Ra meant by doing that. It seems to be something that is way more advanced than I've ever gotten in my study of the archetypes. But I think the magician has a way of giving us more information about the nature of our spiritual journey, that we travel archetypically in the third density by accessing the potentiator of the mind, the high priestess. That is the female portion of ourself that knows all of our pre-incarnative choices and what we've desired to do before we got into the incarnation. So if there's going to be any clothing of ourself in the archetypical mind, I think that the potentiator of the mind can give us a clue to that by how we see our path developing in front of us, and just keep walking that path. And like I was saying before, we just have to keep doing what we're doing and set our intention to do, whether it's clothe ourselves in the archetype or to open our heart to more love or to be of more service to people, then keep traveling that path. And that's the best I can answer there.
Any follow-up questions on that, Murray?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Just one. My profession is in sales, and it's always a challenge to put yourself into the shoes of the customer that you're engaging with. And it occurred to me that, and mindful of Ra's consistent guidance about seeking to see yourself in another and act from that perspective. It sounds to me like a legitimate way to perhaps clothe oneself in another's being as a means of serving them. What do you think of that?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think that when you're in sales or any kind of a job, if you try to figure out what the person who is coming into your store or office wants and needs, whether it's something practical or has maybe a metaphysical twist to it, no matter what it is, when you do your best to help them get what they want, then you are being of service to them. It doesn't matter what you're selling, or that's the way that we do this in this world, this third density illusion, where we think there's separation between each person. That person is a part of you, a part of the creator. So when you can meet their needs, then you've served the creator and you serve that person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those are great questions, Murray. Thank you for asking. Always fascinated by the archetypical mind and becoming archetypes. Dan Dunn, did you have a question you wanted to ask? And then I see Andrew after that, and that's all I'm seeing at this point in the chat window. If you have questions you want to ask Jim, then go ahead, put him in now. Otherwise, we'll just go straight to the pop quiz and have a really long pop quiz. Go ahead, Dan Dunn.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's great to talk to you. I've been listening to your voice pretty much nonstop since October when I discovered raw contact. So the audiobook version is amazing. What are your thoughts on the rise in the popularity of plant medicine? To me, it seems to be a tool to lead people to the law of one. It was for me. There's a common thread in experience where during it, there's a feeling of oneness and profound love. So I'm just curious in your thoughts on that. And also, as it may be, in my opinion, an accelerant to bridge the matrix and potentiator of mind.
Okay. We've had that question asked in our public channeling meditations, and Quo has, on a couple of occasions, said that plant medicines are a very good tool for discovering what you can do after a period of time of using them without them. So they're a way of getting where you want to go, but you shouldn't depend upon them all the time. Use them as an inspiration, as a framework in which to fill in your future journey. So, what was another part of your question?
I experienced it myself as a bridge between the matrix and the potentiator of mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that could well be the way that it works. I have not had a lot of experience with what are now called plant medicines. So how they would actually work, I really don't know. But that could be it. I mean, that makes sense because it goes back to what I was saying before about the matrix and potentiator giving us an idea of what our path is and how we can travel it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Great question, Dan. Thank you. One that I'm sure many in the Law of One community are curious about as well. Andrew, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Hello. Yeah, this is such an honor to be here with you all. Jim, thank you so much for all of the work you've done. It's so amazing to be able to talk to you. So I've been exploring some practices like Kriya Yoga recently, which seem to be kind of like pumping the fluid of my karmic experience as far as I could tell. And I know that like there's kind of a relationship between engaging in some of these practices and experiencing catalyst to a higher degree. I've also been experiencing this catalyst in waves that have been way more powerful than I was anticipating or expecting. And I kind of did a little research on the Quo site and some of the channelings with them. And they mentioned that sometimes entities can like exploit certain blockages and kind of hyper emphasize kind of things that are occurring or projecting from them. And so I was wondering if there's maybe a way that one can distinguish between knowing if like catalyst is just kind of like this natural thing that's occurring, or if there's actually like the case of an entity like really trying to make something happen in oneself. And if there is a way, or if that is the case, like if you had any suggestions for protection or what one might be able to do about that.
Well, I think that when you are experiencing what you feel is the intrusion of a negative entity that is affecting your catalyst, what you're experiencing is the negative entity actually putting a magnifying glass on the catalyst that would be normal for you in a situation and making it more difficult to deal with. So I think what you need to do, first of all, is just to see what your part in the origination of that catalyst would be. If it was a disharmony with somebody else, a misunderstanding, or whatever it might have been that caused the catalyst, then see within yourself if you can balance that catalyst and find love in your heart where there was none before. And then specifically what to do about the negative entity. I think what Ross suggested was that in your meditative period, to send that entity love and light and to wish it well and to mean it, because it's a part of you and a part of the creator too. But sending them love and light is something that will usually make them back off, because to them, receiving love and light is not exactly what they're into. That's a meal that's too rich for them. So that would be my suggestion. Check in to see what the origination of the catalyst was for you, work that out, and send love and light to the negative entity.
It's a great question. Any follow-up questions on that, Andrew?
I think I'm going to process that for a bit. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for your question. It's a very good question.
It's a great question for sure. I see Marilyn has a question. Marilyn, would you like to ask your question? Let's see, Marilyn, your mic is muted. Can you unmute your mic? There you go.
Myself, I'm just saying, so I'm sorry. So my question was, did Ra ever say anything about veganism?
No. Sorry, that's a quick answer.
I didn't think so. So the other person talked about the plants, so I thought maybe there was in there. Thank you.
I seem to recall Quo saying, I don't know, at least once or twice that, well, unprocessed foods, natural foods, plant foods are generally probably a better vibratory level, but I'm pretty sure they didn't say meat is bad or you shouldn't eat meat. And I seem to remember them saying something that taking the life of a plant really isn't that different from taking the life of an animal, and showing respect and gratitude for whatever you're eating is a good thing. Does that sound familiar, Jim? Am I making that up? Is that
No, I think that is correct. And when I look back on it now, when Dawn asked Carla the best type of diet that she should have, it was fruits and grains and vegetables. But then when her body needed a little bit more energy, that the meat, what is it? No, seasoned and cooked anyway, that they did suggest meat at certain times.
Any follow-up questions on that, Marilyn? I think it's fair to say every spirit is unique and every mind-body-spirit complex is unique. Every body chemistry is unique, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for anyone or everyone else. Let's see. I believe I saw another question from Tom, and I believe that might be it. Tom, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yes, thanks, Jonathan. I was just curious, Jim, if you could share your thoughts about influence of negative entities on our thoughts. Sometimes it feels like I'm experiencing that, and sometimes I feel like I might be experiencing that. So I don't know, I don't want to blame everything on the negative entities, So I was just curious how to balance that, and if you had thoughts.
Well, basically, Ross suggested that any negative psychic greeting or psychic attack was something that had a seed within our own being, that they couldn't just come up out of the blue with something and attack us. We had to provide the seed. And like I was saying before, whether it was a disharmonious relationship or communication or accident or whatever it was, then we need to know that that came from us. And we need to work on that and to balance it and to remove that. So that if you feel something that is maybe a negative experience, just look to see what your part in it was. And then take care of that and help to balance it, to find love, to solve it. And then, like I was saying before, just send love and light to the negative friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question. Those are all the questions that I'm seeing in the chat window. If anyone has anything to add, feel free to do that. Did want to encourage folks, you don't have to worry about whether your question is like a good question or a bad question. Jim just always loves answering questions from anyone, and we generally go for questions that are more about enduring spiritual principles rather than transient things that are not going to be important 100 or 1,000 years ago. But I mean, other than that, anything is fair game. I do see Andy has a question, and I think I saw Dan Dunn has another question. Did you want to ask Andy? Go for it.
Yeah, I always have a question, so if you're sure, I mean, I don't know if this lifetime's long enough to answer all my questions actually, but
No, it isn't.
yeah. But yeah, I'd just like to know about your personal experience in terms of like moving into the stillness or silence. You've been practicing for a long time. Do you find that you're in that silence? Are you able to maintain the silence throughout the day, despite, like even when you're talking to someone or busy doing stuff? Is that something that becomes easier, or is that even something that we should even aim to try to achieve?
I don't maintain a meditative state throughout the day. I guarantee you that. But I think that what we can do with our meditation is to take that feeling of oneness or love or purpose with us throughout the day and try to remain on that path. And if something goes wrong, if your cat has a problem, remember that things are turning out the way that they're supposed to. And what we can do best is to shine our love upon that situation and to accept it and do everything we can to help and just make the best effort we can with every step we take, because it's a long life. Some days are long, and we just have to work with them the best we can. Challenges always come. Catalysts always come. That's the way we grow. If we have to deal with a catalyst, then that's another way to grow more. But we have to realize sometimes growth causes change, change causes pain, and not be too concerned if there is pain and difficulty. We can't see the overview here in the third density. If we were without the veil of forgetting, we would see the perfection of everything that happens to us. The catalyst is food for growth. So I think the meditation can just help us to keep all of that in mind and do the best we can to share our love with whatever situation or person or thing that comes our way.
Thank you.
Great question. Any follow-ups on that, Andy?
Not for now. I'll let Dan go.
That's good.
Thank you.
I do have a follow-up question on that. That was a great question, of course, Andy. Thank you. And I guess it made me wonder, Jim, has your meditation practice changed much over the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years, or have you been pretty consistent about doing pretty much the same practice throughout?
Pretty much, I meditate 5 or 6 times a day. And it's an important part of my day. It's sort of the framework of my day. Everything else I do, kind of comes out of what I achieve in meditation.
Nice. And the way you meditate has been pretty consistent. You haven't like tried changing different types of, I don't know.
Not for the last few years. I guess shortly after Carla passed in a larger life, I was doing a different type of meditation. Then I got some guidance from my inner guidance and changed a thing or two here and there. But for the last few years, it's been the same.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Andrew, did you have a follow-up question on this subject, or were you going to ask about something?
I did, yeah. Thank you. Jim, if you feel like it's appropriate and you're comfortable sharing, I would love to hear what your meditation practice is, what it looks like, what you do.
Well, what I do, I discovered after sharing it with a couple of friends of mine, and it's called Foursquare meditation. And I didn't know that when I was starting it. So what I do is I take a deep breath and I focus on my third eye, the indigo ray energy center. And I hold the breath for a short period of time, 3 or 4 seconds. Then I exhale, and then I hold the breath down with the exhale, 3 or 4 seconds. And I continue that all the time with the focus on the third eye. And it seems to increase the feeling in the third eye. And so that's basically it.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to Kriya practice in some ways. Do you ever use mantra in your practice, or you try to abide in silence?
No, I don't use any mantra in my meditations. I do. I start the day with a meditation that I begin with a prayer, a couple of prayers, and end the same way.
Okay.
Beautiful questions, Andrew. Thank you for asking about that. And thank you for sharing about the breathing, Jim. Square breathing, I know, is something that you've mentioned before and something we've talked about quite a few times in our study group as well. And I've heard references to box breathing, as it's called, also elsewhere from other people on TV or whatever. So it's definitely something worth looking into, would encourage. Dan, you've been super patient waiting. Did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, no problem. I think I heard it recently, Jim, where you mentioned the opposite of love is fear, not hate, which I think kind of most of us would think it is. So I found that interesting, and it got me thinking, what other non-obvious polarizations are there that you've discovered? Because we're trying to find out. I think part of this journey is identifying the polarizations and balancing them. So.
Oh, well, I guess we just go through our day and see what's happening. And you get some catalyst here or there, then it's, whatever it was, there's an opposite you need to balance it with. But, the one that Ra used the most was the patience and impatience, and doubt and certainty, balance and imbalance. It just it goes on according to your experience. I don't think there's a set description of all the different things that happen. I mean, everyone's unique as a spiritual seeker. So you have probably some that we others don't have, and we have some you don't.
Interesting. Yeah, I just that one was non-obvious. So I was wondering if there were any others that.
I think the love and fear
that
one is a major one, because we're here on this planet Earth in the third density to learn how to open our hearts in unconditional love to others around us, and especially when there are others that are experiencing fear or creating fear. So I think that the love is probably the most powerful one, and that's probably why it's mentioned the most frequently.
Thank you.
So if the opposite of love is fear, what's the opposite of hate?
Hate.
That was a trick question. I should have saved that for the pop quiz.
Yeah, hate, could be seen as another way of fear. If I hate you, it's probably because I'm afraid of something you're doing to me, or you've done to me. And
Yeah.
there might not be a big difference between hate and fear.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought, usually I think if you ask a random person what the opposite of love is, I would think most people would probably say hate. But yeah, I think as you're saying, yeah, hate probably is some variation, some flavor of fear, because usually you hate something you're afraid of or something you don't understand. So don't know. Good question. Let's see. I am not seeing any. Oh, I see Dan Ferrero has another question. Go for it, Dan.
Thank you. Going back, so I was thinking about what you said, Jim, and what you said, Jonathan, also. So I absorbed it. New question, right? Or kind of related. I felt like, okay, my question is, I think that negative 6D or 5D or 4D entities, they can become wanderers too, right? I believe they could, but at the risk of polarizing positive, correct me if I'm wrong about that, but going with that thinking, what if I was a 6D and negative entity coming back to 3D, and that's why I'm struggling so much. Again, I'm saying this because like I have such a short temper and I have trouble seeing others as myself also. I'm doing better about that. I will say that, especially when I have road rage, I've seen myself pause and not curse them out, but like, okay, you know what? We're part of a system. We're all together. Go ahead. But at the same time, some days I'll be like, you know what? I wish they were gone I wish they were gone from my life. I wish they were gone off the planet. It's extreme thinking, right? But anyways, I'll stop here. But I was wondering about this negative entities coming back as wanderers. If that happens, does the 3D entity have a lower chance of polarizing positive or finding their spiritual journey?
Well, I believe it's pretty rare for negative entities to come back as wanderers because they have to go through the forgetting process, and they might forget what exactly they wanted to do. Just like any of us might forget why we are here, and we have to find our spiritual journey before we can discover it. So I think it's pretty rare, though Rod did, or Don asked Rod if there were any sixth density negative entities in their past that did come back to Earth. And Rod said there were, but they could not identify them. And I figured they could not identify them because there might be somebody known in their distant past that, we look today as a positive person, but maybe they weren't. So I have no idea. But apparently it has happened. But I do think it's pretty rare.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Thank you. I did see a number of questions pop up in the chat window, and I unfortunately have sort of lost sight of the order. So I do see Elaine, and then Andrew, and then Tom, and then Dan Dunn. If I missed anybody, please put your question again in the chat window so I make sure you have time. Elaine, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yep. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Elaine, good to see you.
Thank you so much for being here today. And I just want to say really quick, when my alarm went off this morning and I was like, oh, we're going to see Jim, I thought immediately of Bosco.
Did you really?
Yep. Yes. I think of Bosco often because I read your journal every day. So I'm sending him love and light.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. And I had a different question, a follow-up for Tom's, but since you were talking about meditation, I have a follow-up question about that. You said that you, with your square breathing, and then you focus on the third eye. I can't seem to ever get to that energy center, and I always start with the lower three chakras and clear those energy centers in my meditation in the hopes of getting to the heart center, and then who knows what'll happen after that. But it seems to take a lot of time for me to go through those, to balance the catalyst or clear those energy centers in my meditation. And so I wonder if that is ever part of your practice as well, or is it that you've been doing this so long you can just right off the bat go to the third eye right in the beginning of your meditation practice?
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. My meditation practice started a long time ago. And for the use of catalyst, I would use the balancing exercises. and consciously dedicate the meditation to balancing whatever catalyst I've gotten. So when I'm actually doing meditation just for meditation's sake, I don't use any balancing of the lower energy centers. I was fortunate back in 1972 to be able to awaken my third eye in a way that was kind of unusual. It was the Adventure Trail Survival School in Black Hawk, Colorado, just about 70 miles west of Denver. And part of the practice there was to use our dreams to discover more about the blockages that we had been programmed with, and how to remove the blockages so that the energies could flow from our old root stem brain into the frontal lobes. And so that was something I was able to do. So that sort of gave me that feeling that for the rest of my life that I could focus on that area by itself without doing any balancing, do the balancing separately.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Elaine.
Great question, Elaine. Thank you. Andrew, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, and I know I've been asking a bit, so I'll try to keep it really short. Jim, do you have any practices or recommendations for things we can do to continue to open our hearts up to the reality of oneness?
Yes, I think that if you're aware of what's happening in the world today, in the political scene, that wherever you see something that seems out of kilter, violent, non-heart-worthy, something that most people would say that's wrong, maybe it's wrong, but send love there. Love whatever you see in the news or in your community around you, in your house or in your heart. Because love is the great protector. Love is the great cure. And what we're all here to do is to learn how to love each other person on the planet, to see them as the creator, no matter what they're doing. Their density is the density of an illusion of separation. We're really all one. And so we can recognize that by sending love to everyone at all times and to ourselves.
What a great question. What a great answer. Thank you so much. Tom had a question?
Yes, I was just hoping that Jim would please share his thoughts on just the concept of some of the, I won't call them rules, but I guess the structure of the third density. Like I remember there, like there is a process where when we pass, I remember Ross speaking of walking that path of light and sort of getting to a certain point, and then you can step off based on the intensity, or back in some historical time that we didn't have the veil like we had it today. So it seems like there is a force that kind of is overseeing this, and I didn't know if it all came from the one infinite creator's first original thought, but seems like there are just some decisions being made throughout this process, and I was curious if you could share your thoughts on who's making those decisions.
Who's behind all of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, are we making these decisions? I just thought it would be nice to hear your thoughts.
You mean, why does the third density function the way the third density functions?
Yeah, and like, so how the Ross spoke of the veil not being so, I guess, firm back in like historical times where I don't even know if we had a veil, but then it was decided that we would have a veil because it was more useful. I was curious, well, who made that decision and who's making those choices?
Oh, well, I think it's probably the primal logos, which is another way of saying kind of the creator in a step down fashion. When the creator made the creator was the one infinite creation to start with, then it decided it wanted to know itself. So it kind of got potentiated into the power of love and the focus through light, and the whole creation is made out of light. So I guess when it was discovered that the third density entities that did not have a veil knew they were the creators, that there was no reason to try to move forward out of fear or love. And they knew that they were supposed to be going to the fourth density, but they just couldn't get there because they already knew that they were the creators. What more was there?
Yeah.
So there was a need, in order for there to be an evolution of consciousness back into the unity with the creator, you had to be able to get out of the third density. So paradoxically, the veil between the conscious and subconscious minds provided that possibility, because deep within the subconscious mind of each third density entity is the knowledge that we are one. So the path of the third density then became more possible to travel in a polarized fashion as we become more and more aware of that feeling within that there is more to the life than we think there is. And so we began moving in a direction either positively or negatively. Most people go positive. Ross suggested 90%, 10% negative. And so that veil, with that little germ, that little seed of knowing within us, helps us to polarize our consciousness, where before, without the veil, there was no doubt that we were the one creator. So with a little seed, we think, is there more to life than I thought? And then we go forward, positively or negatively.
It's a great question. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
You bet. We have one more question from Dan Dunn.
Oh, no, I already asked it. Thank you. I appreciate it, Jonathan.
Well, then we have one more question from Andrew. Go for it, Andrew. I saw you have a beautiful question to ask, and then we'll make that the last one.
Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering, Jim, like, how can we support you? You do so much for us.
You can support me with your questions. That gives me things to think about that I haven't thought about before, maybe. Everyone is a unique seeker of truth, and I always appreciate all your questions. So and every now and then you can send me and Bosco some love and light, a little healing energy for Bosco.
What a beautiful question, Andrew. You are the first person to ask that question in the 3 years or so we've been doing this every month. So thank you for that thoughtfulness and that kindness. And Jim, yes, of course we love you, and we'll always be here for you as long as we can, as long as you're willing to be here. Everyone, I did want to thank you for your wonderful questions. It's always a joy, and I always learn new things from everyone who's here. So thank you so much for doing that. And Jim, we do have just enough time for a little pop quiz here. So as you may or may not know, February 17th is the holiday that's known as President's Day. And this holiday was originally called Washington's birthday and was celebrated on his birthday, February 22nd. But in 1968, the holiday was moved to the third Monday in February in order to give federal employees a 3-day weekend. And since the holiday's position often falls between Washington's birthday on February 22nd and Abe Lincoln's birthday on February 12th, just call it President's Day. So today, I'm going to ask you 4 questions specifically about Abe Lincoln and his connections to a few other presidents. As I recall, Abe Lincoln was discussed in the Raw Contact as one who was not a wanderer, but what Ra referred to as a walk-in, meaning he was a 3D entity who allowed his body to be used by a 4D positive entity. For viewers who are not familiar with the story already, can you talk a little bit about that, Jim? About this interesting and weird thing about Abe Lincoln?
Well, apparently during the time when he was, it was 1853. I don't know if he was president. I think, yeah, he was president then. He was weary of his life. He saw so many things in the world around him that were so overwhelming, negative, the slavery and so forth, that he really didn't want to be alive anymore, but he didn't want to take his life. So apparently a fourth density entity made an agreement with him in the sleep and dream state to take over his life, much as Ra would remain with Carla when she woke up and be her, that this entity would be Abraham Lincoln. And so that was the beginning of what was I guess the Civil War was about to begin, the freeing of the slaves. And that time period in the inner realms of positivity, the seeing of slavery as being a reality was something that was very difficult because it's the opposite of the truth, that we're all one. So the war was won by the North. The slaves were freed, and Abraham Lincoln's walk-in had been a part of that great journey. So as far as I can tell, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln by John Wilkes Booth was probably the negative entity's response, because slavery is the way that they work. They separate themselves from others and cause them to become their slaves so that they can do their will and they can take their power.
Yeah. Fascinating, trippy stuff to contemplate for history scholars, for sure. For our viewers who are not familiar with this, I believe you can find Ra's comments on this in session 26 and session 35. If you go to the L&L Research website, you can use their search engine to find this. Just go to L&L Research, click on the little magnifying glass icon you see in the upper right-hand corner, and in the little text box that opens up, you can type in Lincoln, and you could type in any words that you want to search for. And you can either select a all word search, any word search, or exact phrase search. So if there's like an exact phrase you want to see where it pops up in raw channeling sessions, as well as in any of the conscious channeling sessions, all the way up to present day, it's a great tool to use, and I use it every day, multiple days. So Jim, let's find out what other weird things you know about this entity who was the 16th president of the United States. Are you ready for your first question?
Okay.
Your first question: which of the following are true synchronicities between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy? Are you aware that people have noticed weird coincidences, similarities between those two presidents?
No, I wasn't. Aaron, I haven't heard of it.
Has been. I remember hearing about this decades ago. Apparently, a lot of weird things that they have in common, enough to write a book about, apparently. So which of these three are true synchronicities or coincidences between these two? A, both of the president's successors were named Johnson. B, both were shot on a Friday. Or C, Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln and Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy.
No, all three of those are pretty strange. Let's see. A.
Indeed. The correct answer is A and B. Remember, everything's on the table. Could be all of the above, none of the above, or any combination of the above. But yeah, both the president's successors were named Johnson, Andrew Johnson for Lincoln and Lyndon Johnson for Kennedy. B is true also. Both were shot on a Friday. Interestingly enough, Lincoln was shot on Good Friday.
Yeah, I remember when I was a sophomore in high school, as we were changing classes, and in the hall, they said that John Kennedy had been assassinated that very morning. So.
I was going to ask if you remember where you were that day. That was a very traumatic event for anyone who was an adult at that time, I think. Yeah. Anything else you remember from that day? Like, how did you respond to it? Did it mean a lot to you at that time, or were you not that?
Well, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that somebody would shoot a president.
Yeah.
And it's John Kennedy, the one who I thought was very well liked and loved.
Yeah. Well, in his presidency, he was often referred to as Camelot, which I think has a lot of similarity to the work that you and Carla did over the years. Do you remember where did Camelot come from? Where did was it Carla's thing?
Yeah. In 2005, she went to England to give talks at 5 different locations. And one of them was in the area of, what was it? Camelot? The King Arthur and the Camelot. It was in England.
Arthur was Camelot. Yeah.
Yeah. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table.
Right.
She was in some area that had knowledge of that. I didn't go with her at that time. Another friend of ours, part of our group at the time, went with her. And so she decided that while she was there, she wanted to write a little journal entry to let everybody know what went on there. And then when she got back home, she decided, well, I think I'm going to continue that journal entry to let people know what's happening at LNL Research. So that's how Camelot Journal got started. With King
And it
Arthur Dragon.
continues to this day with you and your Camelot Journal. What a
Yeah.
beautiful legacy. Yeah.
Yep.
Andy, did you have a follow-up question?
Well, no, I just wanted to show off and point out that I live near Tintagel, where King Arthur's castle is. It's still there. It's ruined, but it's still there.
Wow.
Nice. Beautiful. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention on the pop quiz question, C is not true. It's been commonly pointed out as a true synchronicity. The first part is true. Kennedy did, in fact, have a secretary named Lincoln, but Lincoln had two secretaries, neither of which were named Johnson. They were John Nicolay and John Hay, who I think we're going to be hearing about shortly. Let's try another question. Abe's wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, was said to have done what at the White House? Was it A, host seances, B, consult with astrologers, or C, communicate with extraterrestrial entities?
B, consult with astrologers.
Interestingly enough, there are two other presidents' wives that consulted with astrologers, Warren Harding and Nancy Reagan, both of which apparently had influences in the president's schedules in both cases. But the correct answer is A. Mary Todd Lincoln hosted as many as 8 seances in the Red Room of the White House, apparently. She had lost one son in 1850, and then she lost her 11-year-old son, Willie, in 1862. And apparently this son was the one who was, if she had a favorite, this was her favorite son, and he was special to Abe Lincoln too. He was supposedly the one who was the most like Abe Lincoln of all their sons, and so she was inconsolable. And apparently, I only found this out from writing the pop quiz, spiritualism was a very big thing at that time because so many had lost family members during the Civil War that spiritualism was the idea that you could communicate with spirits of the deceased through a medium. So apparently Mary Todd Lincoln met up with some people in the Georgetown area who were mediums, and they had seances, at least a couple of which Abe apparently sat in on as well. And most of the articles that I've read seem to indicate that they were charlatans who were doing it. But apparently Mary said to her half-sister, Willie lives, her son Willie, who she lost, Willie lives, he comes to me every night and stands with the same sweet, adorable smile he has always had. He does not always come alone. Little Eddie is sometimes with him. You cannot dream of the comfort this gives me. So, who knows? A mystery. Let's try another one. Theodore Roosevelt possessed what of Abe Lincoln's? Was it A, a ring of Lincoln's, B, a hat of Lincoln's, or C, a lock of Lincoln's hair?
How about a ring of Lincoln's?
Nice. You are close. The correct answer is C. He actually had a lock of Lincoln's hair.
I thought that was probably it, but I didn't want to think, well,
I know.
how did he get a lock of Lincoln's hair?
You should know by now, Jim. Sometimes the weirdest answer is the correct answer. Apparently, Lincoln's secretary, John Hay, the guy that we had mentioned recently, apparently it was not uncommon practice to save a lock of a president's hair and pass on to other people. So
Okay.
apparently, Hay had gifted rings containing George Washington's hair to Presidents Rutherford Hayes and William McKinley. And at the time of Lincoln's death, it was a common tradition to remove some hair to be kept as mementos. So he acquired a little bit of Lincoln's hair and he put it in a ring, which he did indeed pass on to Theodore Roosevelt. So we'll give you a half point on that one. Are you ready for your last question?
Okay.
This is the last one. Lincoln is said to have kept important documents where? Is it A, under his stovepipe hat for quick access, B, on a table by his bedside for recording dreams about them, or C, and boxes stored at his Florida resort to show off to friends and visitors?
B, on a table by his bedside.
That would be cool. That would be cool. The correct answer is actually A. He apparently did keep important papers like folded in the seam of his stovepipe hat. Which is interesting because he is on record as being the tallest president of the United States at 6'4", and that
Oh, really?
hat only like made him look even taller. I
He
guess
was 6'4". I didn't know that.
6'4".
Well, I guess with a hat on, he'd be about 7 feet tall.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And C, I mean, what kind of moron would do that? So obviously not anybody we're going to talk about this time. Jim, as always, it's been such a joy and such a pleasure to hang out with you. Did you have any last thoughts or reflections want to share with folks before we say goodbye?
Well, thank you all for your questions. I know they come from your heart. And I try from my heart to connect back with you with my answers. And hopefully I've done a decent job of that today, but I do really want to thank you all for your questions, for your open hearts, for being here and sharing your love and your light. And please do that when you leave this Zoom meet. Continue doing it like I try to do it in your daily round of activities. That's what we're here for, and we help each other do it. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Well, thank you for being here with your open heart, with your love, Jim. We can feel it every time, and it's such a joy. So thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do in service to others, to all our friends at L&L Research. Thank you for all you've done, continue to do in service to others. For everyone who joined us today on the Zoom call, it was such a joy. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. And for everyone watching this on video at some time in the near or distant future, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We're sending you our love light and receiving yours. Until next time, in the love and light of the one infinite creator. Adonai. Namaste.